Yeah, my name is Arno Ilgner, and I'm the founder of the Warrior's Way mental training method. I've been climbing since the mid 1970s and started developing this material in the mid 1990s, and got a couple of books published and a network of trainers. So psyched to be here with you, Jared.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got a couple of your books
Ah,
as well. So it's
nice.
I've got the fully autographed version
Oh,
of
look at that.
of the book as well. So I'm in the fan club for
There you go.
but yeah, so I mean, I wanted to talk a little bit about today on mental training
Mhm.
because and especially mental training related to climbing, mental training related to injuries and kind of dive into it because I've always, all of
Mhm.
our times we kind of spent together, I've always been fascinated with your ability. I feel like I have always been working to try and improve my mental training to get to some level. And it's a
Mhm.
constant effort on my end. It doesn't come easy. And so I've always kind of appreciated your approach and your ways of looking at things. And I use a lot of the lessons from the books as well. So
Excellent. I mean, just a note, like I'm been working on it too, and even though I wrote, like Rock Warriors Way back in 2003, it's like it's still like being able to apply and experience the material, like really own it. I'm still working on that, so it's an ongoing process for all of us.
yeah, definitely. So let's start. I want to get first maybe a little into your background of developing the method and maybe just kind of through a little bit of a chronology. And then I want to get into some injuries and talking a little bit about how to deal with mental training itself. But how did you kind of come to develop this method
Mhm.
or put things together?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I was around 40 years old and working in a job that I didn't particularly care about or was very passionate about. So, uh, but I was researching about how to be a better employee in the business I was working in. And so, uh, interestingly enough, I kept coming across these authors in either audio programs or books. They kept saying, like, oh, it's your responsibility to find a career that you're passionate about because that's the best way that you can enjoy life and also serve others. So when I reflected on that, or I guess when I heard it many times, it finally got into my head and said, well, the only thing I've really been passionate about is climbing. And so I started looking in the direction of what was particularly skilled at in climbing, and what I was interested in, and it was the mental dimension. Uh, I was known for being able to put up some routes that created, required a lot of mental discipline and management of fear. And so that started the process. And that was like from 1990 to 1995. And in 95, I made a decision to really start teaching this. I had my first students then.
Oh wow. And how did that look? Was it like it was a like in-person class with a few students and you're like, all right, I have these ideas, let's try it out. Was it friends? Did you try it like on friends first? How was that first like,
Mhm.
introduction to what's assumed now become the Rock Warriors way?
Yeah, it was not called, the Warriors Way back then. And this is also, there were just a few climbing gyms
Yeah.
in the mid
This is
90s.
the mid 90s, right? Yeah. So there's
Yeah, this
only
is
a few kind of scattered around.
yeah, just a few, and I was in Tennessee. There weren't any here. And so right at the same time that I was developing this material, I had a climber approach me. Her name was Michelle, and she had some issues with fear. And she saw her at the local cliffs and things. So she asked if I could help her with her fears. And so yeah, we just went out. I don't know, maybe 7, 8 times during the year.
And just
And
climbing together.
yeah, we went climbing together, and I had distilled, the material into like 7 core processes that are in Rock Warriors Way. And so we just went out and said, Michelle, I don't know exactly how to teach this, but I got some ideas. Let's experiment, and she was, game for it. And so that was the beginning of it. Had one student the whole first year.
Yeah, it's like starts with one person, right? And you
Mhm.
try and like refine, change, adjust. You're like, I think I have something. And then you could kind of build from there.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And, about the same time also, Jeff Aki was editor at Climbing Magazine, and he was tasked with coming to North Carolina to Whitesides to do an article for Climbing Magazine on the history. And so since I've done some first ascents there, I went over, and along with a bunch of other first ascensionists, we climbed for a few days with Jeff and talked about the history. And so Jeff was really intrigued when I was sharing about this mental training method, and he actually was the first one to actually write about it, before I was even writing articles about it in Climbing Magazine.
Oh, wow. So that was kind of like, you're like, oh, well, there's some interest in this. This is, in the written topic, and someone else is actually writing about it, something that
Yeah,
you've developed.
yeah. He wrote that short little. I don't know if they had tech tips or what it was at the time, but it was, toward the back of the mag, um, and my phone number was associated with the articles that, if you want more information. And I got about 80 people calling me.
Oh my gosh. Like
So
your phone number was in the magazine for
yeah,
that's
but
great. Yeah.
but I mean, really,
That's
what that
before, was that before cell phones? Was that?
yes, yeah,
Okay, yeah.
it was my landline, and
Voice
uh,
message machine going,
yeah, but
message one, two. Yeah.
the thing is, it's like I I knew from the beginning that this material, was valuable and helpful, beyond just climbers. And so I'd intended to, in some time in the future, to write a book for the general public on it, which, I'm actually in process of doing right now. And I also knew that I needed to test the material and refine it in the medium of climbing, a vehicle that I understood. So it took a long time, but it's like, and it's really one of the important mental training skills. It's just like being willing to, well, having a goal that you're inspired to achieve that gives you vision and direction, but also being willing to take the small steps and really do that work for its own sake, like get enjoyment out of these steps that you're taking toward that goal.
Yeah, and that's really what you're saying, like that writing process. It was really, you're like, all right, you're getting your own fulfillment through distilling down, writing, editing this content with hopefully the end goal that, everyone that will be amplified and everyone in climbing or a subset of people in climbing will connect with it.
Yep, absolutely.
And then where's the kind of Rock Warriors Way traveled, or the Warriors Way traveled to now? Like you started with one person, right? Going on several climbs, figuring it out. Like it's expanded. Like where are we at now with with the philosophy, with the content, with what you're doing?
Yeah, so I got progressively more students, from the mid 90s, to 2003, just a few, mostly locally here in the Southeast. When Rock Warriors Way came out, then, uh, you know, the awareness of the training was obviously broadcast nationally and even some internationally. So, and also there were more climbing gyms.
Yeah.
So I
Climbing was
started,
expanding, right?
yeah, yeah. So I contacted gyms and taught. I taught more outdoors. I taught more in other areas outside of the Southeast. I taught in climbing gyms. So I was teaching a lot, between 2003 and 2009 when espresso lessons came out, even internationally, like in Canada, Australia, a few other places.
And Espresso Lessons being the second book.
Yeah, that was the
Yeah.
second book. And it was about that time in 2009 that some climbers that were in the climbing industry, as guides or instructors teaching other things, or guiding clients on climbs, they started contacting me and wanting to see if they could also teach the material. I guess, it seemed like they read the books and they saw that it was helping them in their climbing
Oh,
and maybe even
interesting.
in their instruction. And so they were inquiring about also being able to teach it. And so I started training trainers, uh, and this expanded into Mexico, into Brazil, into Europe, until we had like 15 trainers, a network of trainers, which is really exciting in a lot of ways. And because the material could be taught in more locations, more frequently. But I couldn't really do it until like really working with the material for a lot of years, like from the mid 90s to about 2010, to really refine the syllabus of the what we call the falling in commitment clinic, because it needed to be able to be replicated with certain standards so we have consistency across trainers for how we're delivering the material.
Yeah, of course.
So it took a long time.
But you develop this network, and really it's now, you have, and it's global all over the world, but people that can implement this kind of systematic framework, in
Exactly.
private or in group settings.
Hmm.
So
Exactly.
let's transition a little bit towards maybe injuries, because that's kind of what I'm kind of interested in, picking your brain on the mental component related to, and maybe start personal. Were there any injuries that you've had, that you've had to, for better or for worse, use some level of mental components? Because I know I've had my own injuries. I know anyone who's climbing at some level has had injuries, and they are tough to manage, from, just having that pain signal from a body tissue, through your spinal cord up to your brain. And so, yeah, I'm interested to see if you've been able to have any tips, tricks, or just information on how you've dealt with some injuries, but a mental aspect related to it.
Jared, I've really been fortunate not to, have like catastrophic injuries or breaking ankles or worse, so I'm really been fortunate, especially in the context of some of the inappropriate risks that I've gotten myself into. Um, I've had minor finger and elbow injuries through the years, and most of those were actually before I started, working on developing this material. But one that I've had, since developing it was around 2011. I took a fall and kind of came in where with my feet.
It was like you were roped up.
Yeah,
It was
roped up.
like a pendulum into the wall.
Yeah, it was a straight on fall, but I guess the wall was about vertical. But yeah, there was outward movement and then some pendulum into the wall. And the left side of the wall was a little bit on an angle. It wasn't flat. And so when my left ankle came in, it kind of twisted like that and severely sprained it. But it did more damage than that. It actually caused some nerve damage from the nerve that goes from my lower back down to my ankle. So I can't like rotate my left ankle very much. Toward its normal, able to be able to rotate it.
But both ways, like in and out, or just one
No,
direction?
just to the outside. So I've had it checked out, in the medical industry and stuff, gotten appointments, things like that. But basically, they don't seem like they can help me with it. So I've had to kind of learn to adapt my climbing to include, that limitation. So I guess mental training wise, it's like I could get frustrated that I can't get help, to fix this. I could be impatient with myself, or I could even continue to try to use my left ankle in the way I've always used it. But I've done my best to apply just accepting the situation as it is, and then working with it, finding like having, you might say, mental flexibility, which is an important kind of grounding way that we approach mental training. Like, we need to be flexible in how we adapt to situations. So for me, I've learned to that I can't step on my inside edge on a hold with my left foot. I have to, like, most of the time, step on my outside edge. So my foot is like this against the wall instead of like that.
Because that's a more stable position for your foot.
Yeah, like the muscles are able to
like
keep
hold it in that spot.
Yeah, able to hold it in position. Whereas when I'm stepping on my inside edge, it just
like
wants
collapse.
to roll. Yeah, collapses and wants to roll off of the hold, which is, not what you want.
Not good in climbing. Yeah.
So, just being adaptable and flexible, and doing what I could. Like, I did what I could to investigate it with the medical industry, but then accepting the diagnosis or whatever, and working with it as best I could.
Yeah, and I think with any injury, that's a hard part. I'm assuming there's a denial component at some stage, right? And if you've tried every type of option, at some level, it sounds like mentally you need to be able to accept, the circumstances and adapt, as you're climbing or as you're moving.
Yeah, I mean, what comes to mind is, like, I don't know, is it 5 or 6 stages of grief, where denial and bargaining and whatever, you finally get to acceptance, where and this is also a really important part of our mental training program, but it definitely is helpful and important for injuries, is until you can accept the situation as it is, you're not going to be able to take effective action, because part of your attention is going to be distracted toward what you wish would happen, instead of focusing on what you're doing to rehab the injury or adapt to a limitation like I experienced.
Yeah. Are there any other components, if you kind of think about all the different, tenets or concepts that you teach? Are there any ones that, like, additionally stand out? Obviously, acceptance, is one component, and maybe it takes time to get to that acceptance stage. But are there any other components related to injuries that you think may be helpful, like mental training aspects, either preventing injuries from occurring, reducing the risk, or helping someone through the process?
Yes, obviously, if we can do preventative mental training, then that would be, the best. And there are, like, and mental training has a lot to do with motivation. Like, how we're motivated is going to determine where our attention gets focused. So, for an example, in the Falling and Commitment Clinic, we teach tangible skills around how to fall properly to diminish chances of injury. We have drills around how to improve commitment, but foundationally, we want the students to experience a shift in their motivation. We want them to, well, let me back up. They tend, like we all tend to come into instruction with an achievement, kind of get it over with motivation.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, go through it, check the box, get the certificate. All right, we're good.
Yeah, they might, when we ask them, like, okay, what do you want to gain from this clinic? What's your takeaway?
Taking the clinic.
Yeah, and we'll a lot of times get answers like, well, I just want to get over my fear of falling. It's like, want to leap over toward a future time when they're over this stressor. And the same thing can be with an injury. So when we do the incremental falling practice, for example, we're doing it in small steps, and we tell them exactly what to focus their attention on. And afterwards, we don't have to convince them that it takes a long time to learn something. They know from their own experience that, if they progress too quickly, they start tensing up, they start getting scared. And they have evidence from their own experience that it takes a long time and they need to have small incremental steps. So in other words, their motivation needs to be more learning based instead of achievement based when they're engaged in that activity. And so motivation is really important for how it could impact or cause injuries. If you're doing hangboard workouts or anything like that, if you just not focused on the quality of the engagement, then you're going to use your body suboptimally and cause an injury. So the question then is like, can you do different training or climbing with a mindset of doing it for its own sake, not because it's good for you or because it'll help you achieve some goal in the future, but when you're in the moment of doing it, can you be focused on just enjoying it for its own sake? And this is to say that it's not that you can't have goals that you want what you're doing now to work toward. That's important too. But when you're engaged in it, are you doing it for its own sake?
And that's fascinating because I'm thinking right now of like rehab exercises. And aside from prevention, but let's say someone gets hurt and they're doing their physical therapy routine. I bet you that the majority, let's say even patients that I see that I prescribe exercises to, are not doing that exercise for its own sake and being like, oh, this feels great. I'm in the moment doing this resistance band exercise or whatever it is. They're like, no, the end goal, I want to get over this injury. Let me go through, check this box, finish this program. So that's interesting you bring that up because it's the attention in the moment to what you're doing, really.
That's the core mental training goal that guides how we do mental training is we need to look at where our attention is. And if it's not in the moment, if it's being distracted by how we're thinking or how we're making decisions or whatever, then we need to become aware of that and bring it back.
So so that makes sense. I kind of see that philosophy of being in the moment, being not thinking of the end goal and trying to, and there's a lot of strategies to do that, right? I know in your clinics, there's like, several different ways to kind of stay in the moment. Are there any other ways that kind of related to injuries that you feel like mental training, mental flexibility can be beneficial?
Yes. A really big one is body awareness. Okay. So injuries happen in the body, right? Like you tweak an elbow or a finger or something. And so we need to be able to heighten our awareness of what is actually going on in the body when we're doing climbing or training or any activity. So a big part of the mental training that we do helps give us tools for heightening our awareness of what's going on in our body and also how we're connecting with the world around us. A really important part of this is because there's such an emphasis or tendency, you might say right now, to just have our attention lost in the mind, lost in our brain, thinking, lost in thinking, overthinking. A lot of climbers talk about like, I think I overthink this situation. And so because attention is up there, they're not as aware of what's going on in the body. And they're basing what they know on how they think about something instead of how their body's experiencing it. So the body awareness practices we have are designed to shift attention out of thinking and into the body. And it's really simple. We want to develop internal situational awareness, you might say, which is structured around breathing, relaxing, and maintaining proper body posture. And then external situational awareness, where their attention is engaged in, what they can feel, the sensory on their skin, like that boundary between themselves and the world around them, what they can hear and see. So if attention is in this expanded body and what we call an observant mind, it's less likely to be in the mind thinking about what you're perceiving, either internally or externally. So it really helps you know what's going on in case you might be using your body incorrectly, but also how you're engaging in the world around you, like on a rock climb. You need to be attentive to how you're grabbing holds. Are you maintaining your breath, while you're climbing, your momentum, instead of like grabbing and thinking about the usability of the hold. You know that the usability of the hold, for example, is by just engaging it.
Yeah.
So.
And even like making eye contact, visualizing it, all those components that put you in that moment, whether it's, climbing or within your body itself.
I mean, it's a critical mental training skill, is to be able to what we call unhook our thinking from our awareness. Like we tend to think we are our thoughts. Like our sense of self is just this ongoing thinking that's going on in the mind. And but we all experience like this ability to know, as well, I had that thought, like, so there's something that is observing the thoughts that are going on, that we call it the observer or the witness. Being able to step back and observe what's going on in the mind prevents us from just all the time reacting to it. And so, body awareness drills or practices like I just described is a really helpful way to get attention out of the head. And then you can also notice when it'll go back, because it will, like very quickly, a lot of
very
times.
quickly. Yeah.
So
Almost.
just being able to redirect, toward the task or toward this expanded body, observing mind, is really important.
And is there anything you personally do? Like, do you have any routine or anything that you do consistently to sharpen the mind? So for example, for me, I'm a physical therapist. My routine is more so I do a set of exercises, each night before I go to bed. It's right after I brush my teeth. And that sharpens, let's say, my body. I've been working on trying to sharpen my mind, and tagging and being aware of that, external causes, all those things. But I'm interested, do you have any specific routine or anything that you personally do that you kind of connect yourself with your body?
Yes, I do. It's I don't know, maybe a 7 to 10 minute Tai Chi routine. So every morning, I do Tai Chi, and then I'll do maybe 10 minutes of meditation. Okay, so with Tai Chi, Tai Chi is really interesting because it helped me understand the responsibilities for the different parts of the body. Like, what do the feet do? What are they responsible for? The legs, the hips, the upper torso, the arms, the head, and the eyes. Like, we have these different parts of our body that have different responsibilities. Like the feet are grounding, the legs power the movement. We move from our center, our hips. Our upper body expresses the movement. Our head and eyes direct attention. And so doing the Tai Chi, I can actually, over time, get better and better at using my body the way it's intended, the way it's constructed, so I can utilize all of their respective responsibilities better. And then meditation, of course, is, well, meditation is, there are a lot of different ways we can approach it. Like the typical one is like, focus on something like the breath, an object of focus. Notice when it gets distracted, bring it back. So that's really helpful. Another is just to let your, like you might say, choiceless awareness, where you just notice what you notice. Like
you're like the observer, right?
Yeah, like you're just noticing sensations or sounds or your breath, or even a thought come in.
Yeah, so if a thought comes in, you just kind of tag it, that's a thought, but you don't dwell on the thought itself.
You don't dwell on it. In fact, you watch it appear, how it's appearing, and then you watch it dissipate. Because like if I close my eyes and I say, okay, Arno, visualize a daisy flower. I don't see a daisy popping up in my field of vision. It's in my imagination that seems like it's beyond, this black screen that's behind my closed eyes. So it's an image, in other words. And so thoughts are like that. They're images that come into our awareness, and then they just like dissipate. Like we can't even like hold on to them. And that's so important mental training wise, because we struggle with limiting thoughts. If we can start relating to them as they just come into our awareness and then they dissipate, we can let them go a lot easier.
Yeah. And I almost imagine, I'm thinking of someone that's just like injured, right? And I can't imagine how, let's say a climber's injured, how many times a day, like those thoughts like enter the brain of you're injured, this hurts. And we also have the physical stimuli. Not only do we have the mental, but you feel the injury and then it reminds you. And to have that power to be able to tag it or understand it's there, but as you mentioned, kind of like let it go away, I think that would help a lot of people to develop that skill when they're in that process of having that injury.
Yeah, another thing comes to mind, and I think you touched on it a little earlier, and that is, if we can focus our attention in the moment on the injury or whatever's going on, we'll maybe enjoy, that the exercises that we're doing, for rehabbing the injury. Another dimension to that, though, is like sometimes it's just not enjoyable.
Yeah.
And so in mental training wise, we have this strong tendency to, just cling to comfort, grasp for what's comfortable and reject what's stressful. And a big part of what we would say training to be a warrior, to be more courageous in how we're approaching life, it includes like being able to deal with stressors better, being present for the comforts and the stressors, whatever is going on in the present moment, kind of trusting in how it's unfolding, like seeing value in it, even if you don't necessarily like, doing a particular exercise.
Yeah, and I mean, the exercise may even be painful to do, right? And understanding that it's not always pleasure that we're seeking through everything that we do. And there's some stress, some pain, some other aspects that lead towards progress.
Yeah. I mean, it points to motivation, right? Like, can we be motivated when we're doing those rehab exercises to do them for their own sake? This is my life, from right now to 15 minutes or however long it takes. That's my life. Like, if I'm just wanting to be over here when it's over with, then I'm not present for a part of my life. And not only will I not do the rehab exercises with full attention and most effectiveness, I'm really just living my life to get it over with. I'm not really enjoying that aspect to the best that I can.
Yeah, which is really like that process that of going through it. But being in the moment in the process of whatever feelings, emotions, experiences that you're having, which is incredibly hard to do as you're going through a kind of rote routine. And I think like on the physical therapy end, that's why I always try and give things that are mentally stimulating and engaging. So rather than having like a resistance band and just doing 10 repetitions, there's some level of you're squatting down on your tiptoes and you are tracking your eyes almost for eye contact on the climbing hold. And now there's some level of like arousal, stimulation, engagement in the process.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really helpful to keep it as interesting as possible, to, pique the curiosity. And a skill that we need to develop mentally is just to be present for whatever is going on, because sometimes it's just not going to be fun, but we're investing our life right now. And I mean, we just look at this as a microcosm of our life. It's like we don't want to be living our life to get it over with. And if we're just constantly wanting to be at some future time we think is better than right now, like striving for that future comfort, we're just leaping until we die.
Yeah.
Not a nice scenario.
Yeah. There's one thing I've been trying. It's called the five senses, and I'm not doing. I don't think I'm fully doing this correctly, but it's something along the lines of I pause like in the middle of the day, and I'm like, all right, what are five things I see, and then four things that I hear, three things I smell, two things I can touch, it's and then one thing I can taste. And I was like, wow, this actually puts me in the present. Versus like the 1,000 different thoughts that are, jumping in and out of the mind.
Absolutely. I mean, it's we use that exercise sometimes also, but when I do similar, like if I notice I'm lost in thought, I go, just do kind of a transition exhale and then shift my attention toward, I might close my eyes for a moment and feel my breathing, relaxing, proper posture, and then open my eyes and pay attention to what I feel, see, and hear, just to redirect my attention toward how I'm feeling internally and externally in this present moment.
Nice.
Then I'll let attention go back and thinking, for it's answering that email or whatever.
Yeah, but that's the strategy that you utilize. I like that. Hold on. So it's basically close your eyes, take a breath in, exhale, open the eyes, and observe. Is that the process?
I mean, everybody could tweak it, to what the kind of feels the best to them. But closing your eyes directs attention inward. That the sense of sight is like really overpowering other senses. And it actually takes a lot of brain processing. So if we just close our eyes and just tune into what's going on inside, focus on the breathing for a little bit, relaxing, noticing tensions, relaxing them, and then kind of expand our posture, not overly, just we have a tendency to kind of shrink, tuck in our head into our shoulders. And so just to re-engage it, expand it, and then I can exhale and open my eyes. And now I can, and especially with a soft eye gaze, just like more peripheral vision so I'm not narrowing down on some objects. But people can experiment with what works with them just to recenter.
Yeah, I'm gonna try that one today, definitely, to add another tool to the toolbox. So in closing, if there's anything you can kind of think of as maybe some general advice or maybe some global advice, but ways that climbers can just maybe use mental energy or use kind of some mental components to either prevent injury, rehabilitate, or anything related to injury, what would be your kind of closing thoughts on relating kind of the mind?
Yes, it really has a lot to do with motivation again, where we want to be where we are. We want to be where we currently are in our circumstances. And so, in other words, we need to be patient with the injury, not try to rush the process. We need to be persistent, to do the exercises, with awareness. We need to be curious about how the healing process is going, how the rehab process is going. Just think about if I'm curious about what's out the window, my attention goes there, right? So if we're curious about how we're doing these exercises, our attention will go there more, and we're going to be more aware of what we're doing well, what we need to tweak, and how the injury is progressing. And I think humility would be, also an important part of it. Our ego is, wants to hurry up and rush the rehab process so we can get back to the way we were. But just like my injury, it's like we kind of get to a new normal, not the old normal. And just being able to, um, work with what the new circumstances are going to be, I think is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, great advice. I mean, I know I'm going to be going back, and as I work through some of my own like little tweaks, taking some of those like snippets of mental practice and ways to
Mhm.
kind of be in the moment, work with what we have, put our attention. I think this is all some really good knowledge and information for climbers.
Yeah, glad to share it.
All right. Well, where can people find you? Where, on the internet, on social media?
Best place would be our website, warriorsway.com. And, our email addresses are there, social media links. I think on Instagram and Twitter, it's at Rock Warriors Way. Uh, Facebook, I think it's The Warriors Way. So yeah, you can find us there.
All right, awesome. And your books as well. Can they get those
Mhm.
on the webpage?
Yes, they can. Mhm.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you, Arno, and hopefully we'll get to hang out sometime in person once this kind of
Yeah.
pandemic gets at bay.
Yeah. Miss you, Jared.
I miss you as well. Thank you.